How Boeing's biggest rival crashed and burned. The fall of McDonnell Douglas picture. It's 1967, and the American aerospace industry is about to witness the birth of a giant. Two powerhouse companies, McDonnell Aircraft Corporation and Douglas Aircraft Company, merged to create what would become one of the most formidable forces in aviation history. McDonnell Douglas wasn't just another aircraft manufacturer. It was a titan that would challenge Boeing's dominance, revolutionize military aviation, and leave an indelible mark on the skies. But what happened next is a tale of engineering triumphs, catastrophic failures, and corporate decisions that would ultimately lead to one of the most shocking mergers in business history. This is the story of how America's aerospace giant crashed and burned, and how its demise changed the aviation industry forever. The merger that created McDonnell Douglas in April 1967 was born from necessity and ambition. Douglas Aircraft Company, founded by Donald Douglas in 1921, had built legendary aircraft like the DC-3, which revolutionized commercial aviation in the 1930s and carried over 90% of the world's air traffic by 1939. Meanwhile, McDonnell Aircraft Corporation, established by James Smith McDonnell in 1939, had made its fortune in military contracts, producing fighter jets like the F-4 Phantom II, which became one of the most successful military aircraft ever built with over 5,000 units produced. The Douglas Company brought commercial aviation expertise and the iconic DC brand, while McDonnell contributed military prowess and financial stability. The merged entity became the world's largest aerospace company overnight, with combined revenues of $2.6 billion and over 140,000 employees. James McDonnell became chairman and CEO of the new corporation, while Donald Douglas Jr. served as president, though the McDonnell family maintained controlling interest. The company established its headquarters in St. Louis, Missouri, positioning itself as Boeing's primary rival in both commercial and military aviation markets. The early years of McDonnell Douglas were marked by spectacular successes that seemed to validate the merger's logic. The company's military division dominated the skies with aircraft that became legends in their own right. The F-4 Phantom II continued its incredible run, serving not just the U.S. Air Force and Navy, but air forces around the world, from Israel to Japan. The company developed the F-15 Eagle, which first flew in 1972 and became arguably the most successful air superiority fighter ever built, maintaining an incredible air-to-air combat record of 104 victories and 0 defeats. McDonnell Douglas also created the A-4 Skyhawk, a lightweight attack aircraft that served for decades, and the AV-8 Harrier, a revolutionary vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. In the commercial sector, the company's DC-8 jetliner competed directly with Boeing's 707, capturing significant market share in the growing jet age. The DC-9, which first flew in 1965, became one of the most successful short-haul aircraft ever built, with over 2,400 units eventually produced across all variants. These successes generated enormous cash flow and established McDonnell Douglas as a serious competitor to Boeing's growing dominance. However, it was the development of the DC-10 that would simultaneously represent McDonnell Douglas's greatest commercial aviation achievement and the beginning of its downfall. Launched in 1970 as a wide-body trijet designed to compete with Boeing's 747 and Lockheed's L-1011 TriStar, the DC-10 was an ambitious project that pushed the boundaries of aviation technology. The aircraft featured innovative design elements, including engines mounted both under the wings and in the tail, and could carry up to 380 passengers depending on configuration. McDonnell Douglas invested heavily in the program, spending over $1.5 billion in development costs. The DC-10 initially showed promise, securing orders from major airlines including American Airlines, United Airlines, and Continental Airlines. By 1972, the company had received orders for over 200 aircraft, and production was ramping up at the Long Beach facility. The DC-10 represented McDonnell Douglas's attempt to break into the lucrative wide-body market that Boeing was beginning to dominate with the 747. For a brief moment, it seemed like the company had created a Boeing killer that would establish its dominance in commercial aviation. But then disaster struck, and struck repeatedly, turning the DC-10 into a nightmare that would haunt McDonnell Douglas for decades. On June 12, 1972, American Airlines Flight 96 suffered a catastrophic cargo door failure that caused explosive decompression and damaged the aircraft's control systems. Miraculously, the crew managed to land safely, but the incident exposed fundamental design flaws in the DC-10's cargo door mechanism. Despite this warning, McDonnell Douglas and the Federal Aviation Administration failed to implement adequate fixes. 2 years later, on March 3, 1974, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 crashed near Paris after suffering an identical cargo door failure, killing all 346 people on board. At the time, the deadliest aviation accident in history. The tragedy revealed that McDonnell Douglas had known about the design flaw, but had only implemented voluntary modifications rather than mandatory fixes. The company's reputation took a severe hit, but worse was yet to come. On May 25, 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 crashed during takeoff from Chicago O'Hare Airport, killing 273 people. The cause was determined to be an improper maintenance procedure that led to engine separation, but the DC-10 bore the blame in public perception. Following this crash, the FAA took the unprecedented step of grounding the entire DC-10 fleet worldwide for 37 days. The DC-10 disasters created a crisis of confidence that McDonnell Douglas never fully recovered from. Airlines began canceling orders, and new sales became increasingly difficult as passengers actively avoided flying on DC-10s. The aircraft became known in the media as the Death Jet, and some airlines removed DC-10 markings from their aircraft to avoid passenger anxiety. The grounding alone cost McDonnell Douglas an estimated $1.24 billion in lost sales and compensation claims. More importantly, the disasters damaged the company's engineering reputation and raised questions about its safety culture. Internal documents revealed that cost-cutting measures and pressure to compete with Boeing had led to compromises in design and testing procedures. The company faced hundreds of lawsuits from victims' families and saw its market share in commercial aviation begin to erode. While the DC-10 would eventually return to service and compile a relatively normal safety record over its remaining operational life, the damage to McDonnell Douglas's brand was irreversible. Boeing capitalized on these troubles by promoting its safety record and reliability, effectively positioning itself as the safer choice for airlines and passengers. As the commercial aviation division struggled with the DC-10 crisis, McDonnell Douglas faced additional challenges that would compound its problems throughout the 1980s and 1990s. The end of the Cold War dramatically reduced military spending, hitting the company's defense division hard. The Pentagon cut back on fighter jet orders, and several major military programs were canceled or scaled back significantly. The company's dependence on government contracts, which had been a strength during the height of the Cold War, now became a liability as defense budgets contracted. Meanwhile, Boeing was diversifying and growing stronger, benefiting from the success of the 737 family and beginning development of what would become the 777. Airbus, the European consortium, was also emerging as a serious competitor, offering airlines an alternative to both American manufacturers. McDonnell Douglas found itself squeezed from both sides, lacking the resources to develop new commercial aircraft while facing reduced military orders. The company's aging product line in commercial aviation consisted mainly of DC-9 variants and the troubled DC-10, neither of which could compete effectively with Boeing's newer designs or Airbus's A320 family. The 1990s brought a series of strategic missteps and missed opportunities that accelerated McDonnell Douglas's decline. The company attempted to revitalize its commercial division with the MD-80 and MD-90 series, essentially stretched and updated versions of the successful DC-9, but these aircraft failed to generate significant market interest. The MD-11, an updated version of the DC-10 with improved engines and avionics, proved to be a commercial disappointment, selling only 200 units compared to the company's projections of over 300. Airlines preferred Boeing's 747-400 or were waiting for new designs from Boeing and Airbus. McDonnell Douglas's market share in commercial aviation fell to just 10% by the mid-1990s, compared to Boeing's 60% and Airbus's 30%. The company lacked the financial resources to develop an entirely new aircraft design, as modern airliner development costs had risen to $10–15 billion. In the military sector, while the F-15 and FA-18 Hornet continued to generate revenue, new programs were limited, and the company lost several major competitions to Boeing and Lockheed Martin. The C-17 Globemaster III cargo aircraft provided some success, but it wasn't enough to offset the overall decline. By the mid-1990s, it became clear that McDonnell Douglas could no longer survive as an independent company. The aerospace industry was consolidating rapidly, and the company lacked the scale and resources to compete effectively in both commercial and military markets. Boeing, recognizing an opportunity to eliminate its primary American rival and gain access to McDonnell Douglas's military contracts and expertise, approached the struggling company about a merger. The negotiations were complex, involving not just the two companies, but also government regulators concerned about creating a monopoly in American commercial aviation. On December 15, 1996, Boeing announced it would acquire McDonnell Douglas for $13.3 billion in stock, creating an aerospace giant with combined revenues of $48 billion and over 200,000 employees. The merger was presented as a combination of equals, but in reality, it was Boeing absorbing its weakened rival. McDonnell Douglas shareholders received 1.34 Boeing shares for each McDonnell Douglas share they owned, and several McDonnell Douglas executives joined Boeing's leadership team. The acquisition of McDonnell Douglas was completed on August 1, 1997, officially ending 30 years of intense rivalry between America's two largest aerospace companies. The merger transformed Boeing from primarily a commercial aircraft manufacturer into a diversified aerospace and defense giant, giving it access to McDonnell Douglas's military contracts, including the F-15, F/A-18, and C-17 programs. Boeing gained manufacturing facilities in St. Louis and Long Beach, as well as thousands of engineers and technical specialists. However, the integration proved more challenging than anticipated, with cultural clashes between the two companies' engineering philosophies and management styles. Many industry observers noted that while Boeing had acquired McDonnell Douglas, the merged company adopted many of McDonnell Douglas's cost-cutting approaches and financial focus, moving away from Boeing's traditional engineering-driven culture. The McDonnell Douglas commercial aircraft programs were quickly terminated, with the MD-11 production ending in 2001 and the MD-80-90 series phased out shortly thereafter. The Long Beach facility was eventually closed, ending Douglas's historic presence in California that had lasted over 75 years. The fall of McDonnell Douglas serves as a cautionary tale about how even aerospace giants can crash and burn when engineering excellence takes a back seat to cost-cutting and competitive pressure. From its formation in 1967 as the world's largest aerospace company to its absorption by Boeing 30 years later, McDonnell Douglas experienced both soaring heights and devastating lows. The company created some of the most successful military aircraft in history and contributed significantly to America's aviation heritage. But the DC-10 disasters and subsequent strategic missteps proved insurmountable. The merger with Boeing eliminated America's last major commercial aircraft competitor, creating a duopoly with Airbus that persists today. Ironically, some of the same pressures that brought down McDonnell Douglas, cost competition, safety compromises, and rushed development, would later plague Boeing itself with the 737 MAX crisis. The legacy of McDonnell Douglas lives on in the military aircraft that still serve around the world and in the lessons learned from one of the most dramatic corporate collapses in aviation history. Its story reminds us that in the high-stakes world of aerospace, success can be fleeting, and even the mightiest giants can fall from grace when they lose sight of the engineering excellence and safety culture that made them great in the first place.